So you and I both know that hard work is a prerequisite if you want to be fast. But are the pros really working that much harder than you and I when we go out to run? So today I want to talk about what actually makes a runner fast. If you haven't been with me here before, I'm Jesse Funk. This is a show I call Runner's High where we talk about everything running. And today, we're going to get to the nitty-gritty of what exactly makes a runner fast. Now, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. The so true yet also very upsetting reason that some people are faster than you or faster than me is genetics, right? You and I and everybody else, as far as I know, don't get to choose who their parents are. And that is a genetic potential that you inherit that you have no choice in. But it does play a pretty big factor depending on, how fast you want to go. The thing I'm trying to get at here is basically, yes, so like I ran in college, I ran into NAIA schools, now NCAA Division II. I was not fast enough to run Division I. And I will never, despite how hard I might work, be running in a race with Mo Farah and Galen Rupp and anybody running with Olympic caliber. I'm not, we're leagues apart. And I would say it's not a matter of they work that much harder than me. They don't work exponentially harder than me, at least at the height of my training. Do they work harder? Probably. But enough to cover that distance in time? Probably not. So genetics is a huge factor that you can't overcome. But we don't like to talk about it. That's okay. But once you acknowledge that, you begin to focus on what can I control? And understanding that, hey, there's so much I can control. And as I've said before on this channel, which if you haven't heard me say, subscribe. I'm sure you'll hear me say it. You should be racing yourself. How fast are you going compared to you yesterday? That's the ultimate race, because it's a subtle acknowledgement that we can't do anything about that genetic component. However, instead of being, sullen and sulking and saying, oh, I'm never going to be Olympic level, you go, I love doing this. Good. I enjoy doing it. Awesome. So let's do it. Great. And then you continue on with your training because you can't do anything about it, so you focus on what you can. So let's get to the factors that you can control and how those can play into how you get faster. Another easy one, let's get out of the way, is nutrition. Nutrition and hydration in particular. You need to eat well. You got to fuel your body if you want to go fast. And you have to be hydrated. Why? Because our muscles use water, and in the production of energy, there is a thing called a sodium-potassium pump where your cells are interchanging sodium-potassium, moving glycogen around, creating ATP, which is energy, and then you move forward with that energy. So what you eat comes back in terms of your response. And then hydration, how well you prepare your body to be hydrated to perform, also comes back as the response of how fast can I go. Now we know that there's a certain amount of dehydration that is not going to be a big deal. Like you can perform to a certain level, but past that point, then you actually need to take in fluid, and often you need to take in electrolytes. We talk about electrolytes all the time. You see all these sports drinks, and what do they mean? I'm actually working on something that's personalized to the amount of electrolytes you lose because it's different for everybody. It has to do with your genetics, like we talked about in the beginning. But we'll deep dive into that in another one, in another video. If you want to see the products out, soulbreed.com/shop. But you need those electrolytes because they are involved in a number of functions in your body, including muscle contraction and that energy production. And that's why you want to replace them after a certain period of time working out. Often the shorter stuff, not such a big deal. You can kind of get away with it. both poor nutrition and poor hydration for shorter duration efforts. But if you want to maximize your potential, you have to have both of them tip top. They've got to be at the top of the game. And I would suggest, even if you're a shorter course athlete like me, who likes to focus on 5K, 10K, that kind of stuff, your day-to-day, each individual day may be short, but collectively, you will fatigue out in those kind of lack of nutrients in your diet or a lack of proper hydration strategy will show up over time. So let's get on to a little bit more important, a little bit easier to focus on issue that we need to address and how you're going to get faster and what you can implement in your day-to-day actual running routine. And that is really under one umbrella, and that's running economy. Now, there's actually kind of a difference. It's often interchanged. People say running economy or running efficiency, and they're very similar, but I like to separate them out a little bit because they're slightly different factors. They're very, very, very intertwined, so people use them interchangeably, but so running economy is going to be how easily your body uses energy for the given output. So like, we basically measure that in VO2 max, which is a measurement of saying how easily do you use oxygen to produce a certain amount of power. So these numbers don't make any sense at all, but like if, say, I want to produce 10 joules of power and I need one oxygen molecule, again, this is complete nonsense, but just go with me, then I'm getting, 1 to 10 ratio. But say you want to produce 10 joules of power and it takes you 5 oxygen molecules, well, I'm way more economical because I'm spending, or I need less oxygen to produce the same amount of power. That is largely tied to that genetic potential earlier we talked about, which sucks, but you actually can improve your VO2 max to some degree. So it is, I like to think about it as you have a genetic ceiling, and that is when you are absolutely trained to your maximum. So if you're just getting started, you're not well trained, or even if you've been training for a while, there's probably still a little bit of push you can get to. It's very difficult to get to that genetic ceiling. So there's some training we can do, and I talk about how to train VO2 max in other videos on the channel. So if you haven't seen those, subscribe, check those out here in a minute. But more importantly, we want to talk about running efficiency and how that plays into economy. Now, running efficiency has to do similarly with getting a similar amount of power. We'll use our 10 joules again, nonsensical number, so physicists, please don't get mad at me because I know 10 joules is not going to be accurate for the amount of power we're producing. So again, 10 joules, how efficient are you in producing that? The efficiency has to do with your form. So if you are really poor, if you're moving with a lot of extra motion, then you're using a lot of extra energy to get the same output. This does not have to do with your genetic potential because it's not about your rate of oxygen consumption, which is that VO2 max. It has to do with how your brain is controlling your body and the firing pattern that your muscles are going through to achieve a given output. That's efficiency. So I see this sometimes, and I always want to stop people, but I never do because that would be weird. So I get to talk to you instead. I see people who are running, and they're running where, like, your legs should come out one in front of you. So I'm going to do T-Rex arms here since I'm sitting. Your legs should come out just in this kind of single file motion, but instead they'll tilt at the knee and then their foot will swing out. So it's like you've seen these people. Hopefully you're not one of them, and if you are, we're going to work on it. So when their leg goes back, pushes off, and then the foot swings around to come back to touchdown here. So it swings around, and then the other one goes back, swings around. Now, maybe that person can produce 10 joules of power, but they're wasting a lot of energy by flipping their legs around to the outside to get it back to the front. There's not an effectiveness. I like to think of it as being an effective runner. To be efficient, because you're not wasting a lot of energy. So when you work on what your form is doing and make sure you're not wasting any motion, then your efficiency goes way up. And how does that correlate to economy? Well, let's think about it for a moment. Remember how I said economy is the rate of oxygen consumption for a given output. So in my example, I took one oxygen molecule to make 10 joules of power. Again, nonsense, but that's what we're going with. You took 5 oxygen molecules to make 10 joules of power. Maybe that's because you're flipping your legs out, and for some reason, you decided to run with your arms flailing around. And that's how you run. Well, you probably don't need to be doing this motion to run. You probably just need them at your sides, relaxed, going forwards and backwards. There's subtleties within that. Crossing your body, that's more common. I don't usually see people flailing their arms about. But as an exaggerated example, think about that. If you're doing all these extra motions, well then clearly you're going to need more oxygen to create energy for the outputs that you're doing. So if you reduce these wasted motions, instead of flailing about, you have this more relaxed, comfortable arm swing. You stop, flipping your legs out to the side and work on, having that straightforward back kind of motion. Now we're no longer wasting energy on nonsensical arm movements and nonsensical leg movements. Now maybe you only need 3 oxygen molecules for that 10 joules of power. So your VO2 max didn't increase, but your efficiency did. So now, if your body can utilize 5 oxygen molecules, it may be able to produce 12 joules of power or 14 joules of power, something like that. And now you're going to go faster. So all of these things combined kind of work synchronously to make you go faster. Again, can you do anything about that genetic potential? Your VO2 max ceiling, that genetic ceiling? No. So why worry about it? You shouldn't. What you should focus on is, am I running effectively, efficiently? Am I doing a good training plan, getting enough rest? And then from there, how's my nutrition? And you got to be honest. How is my nutrition? Longtime friend and former pro triathlete, Barb Lindquist, in her talks with upcoming pros and pros in training, she always mentions the 90-10 rule. If you're eating well 90% of the time, that typically means whole foods, fruits, vegetables, meats, whole grains, that kind of stuff. If you're eating well 90% of the time, and you have a treat 10% of the time, you're probably fine. She's not real restrictive on you've got to eat this way or that way, and you decide for you what you're going to eat, but you do have to be honest about, am I eating the right things? I in particular have trouble with sugar, like many of us here in North America. So sometimes I have to journal to go, this is what is most effective for me, or how to be honest. But once you do that, then you know everything's working in harmony. Training well, I've been working on my running form or getting somebody to help me look at my running form and make changes appropriately. I've had enough time to adapt. I'm eating well, making sure I'm hydrated. And now I can go to my potential of how fast I can go. So, do you have any questions for me about anything running related or triathlon related? I'm open to that, as some people have asked triathlon questions of me, and I love to do videos on that as well, as I spent nearly a decade trying to pursue a professional career and hit my own genetic ceiling in that pursuit. So leave them down in the comments below. I'd love to get a question from you and do a video just for you. I'll see you next time on the next episode of Runner's High.